There's a phase in CAT prep that absolutely no one tells you about. You study more, you give mocks, and you analyze them. But still, no movement. Same score, same percentile. सबसे painful part ये होता है कि you're trying your best, but you're not actually going anywhere. That is the plateau, and almost everyone hits it at some point in their CAT journey. I did as well. And today I want to talk to you about exactly what I did to get out of that. No motivation speak, no fluff, let's get right down to it. My mocks were actually stuck around somewhere 94 to 95 percentile on good days, and on really bad ones they would even slip below 90. Every time that happened, it kind of just broke me a little because I wasn't lazy, I was consistent. 4 mocks a week, full analysis, timed sections, everything. Still, कुछ हो ही नहीं रहा था. And that's when it actually hit me. Maybe the problem isn't effort. Maybe it's the way I'm using it. Because after a point, more mocks, that is more of the same thing that you were doing earlier, don't help. Better learning from those mocks actually does. So I'm going to be talking about the kind of analysis that you actually need from your mocks to improve in the next one. I decided that okay, if giving 4 mocks a week was doing absolutely nothing for me and my performance was varying so wildly, there was a problem. So I decided that for the time being, I'd just cut down the number of mocks from 4 to 2 a week, but I would break this down like a crime scene. So every question that I either got wrong or I got stuck in went into 4 buckets. The first, didn't know it, तो desperation में guess मारा सोच के कि मैं intelligent guess कर रहा हूँ. Second, knew it but बहुत time लगाया solve करने में. The third, knew it but messed it up mentally. And the fourth, knew exactly how to solve it, was doing exactly what I was supposed to do, but silly mistake कर दी. Calculation गलत कर दी या फिर numerator denominator को इधर उधर कर दिया. Question में क्या पूछा था वो end तक आते आते या तो दिमाग से ही निकल गया या फिर गलत पढ़ लिया या फिर ध्यान ही नहीं दिया उस पे. जो भी आंसर आया बस वो ऑप्शन में था तो बस टिक मारा और निकल गए. If the last 2 buckets were big, I knew that my problem was not the content, it was not the concepts, but it was composure. So instead of another mock, I would run a 40-minute micro drill on that topic. And I would see exactly what went wrong. Like, silly mistake is a very broad term. I would see what kinds of silly mistakes I was making. Usually what happens when you analyze mocks is that the moment you come across something that was a calculation error or something like that, something that you would classify as a silly mistake, the instinct is to simply say, अरे यार ये तो मैं normally solve कर दूंगा, ये आगे से नहीं करूंगा, ये तो calculation mistake थी, इसको सही मान लेते हैं. I know that happens. I know you do it. Deny it all you want. So instead of doing that, I began making a list of these silly mistakes. What exactly was I doing? Or rather, what exactly was I prone to doing? Mock से पहले formula की list में revise करूँ या ना करूँ, the one thing that I would absolutely do is revise the kind of silly mistakes that I was making because that got them in my conscious brain. So the moment a calculation comes in front of me and I'm actually on that very step in which I'm prone to making that silly mistake, what I revise would come to me and I would be careful. Maybe I would take 2 or 3 extra seconds there, but that would ensure that instead of getting a negative mark, I would actually boost my score. Now, moving on to mental mess ups. I would try to see where exactly in a question was I getting confused. And if that meant choosing between 2 alternatives, I would come back to the question and I would see which one generally works for me. This ensured that the next time I saw a similar situation or was confronted with a similar dilemma, I would not have to actually think and choose in the exam. I would already know which one I'm going with. And that's it. Saves time, saves a lot of effort as well. Let's move on to the next one. Knew it but did it slow? This is where you try to understand why. Calculation slow thi ya fir सोचना बहुत पड़ा. If it was the former, meaning calculation, then maybe you could have seen, or maybe you could train yourself to see if the options were spaced quite a bit apart, in which case you could have used approximations and made your life easier. If that was not the case and the options were really bunched together, then you would have to actually make a judgment call. You would either have to deprioritize that or you would have to know exactly that approximations are not going to help you. The absolute worst thing to do in this scenario is to not look at the options, not figure out that they are actually bunched up together, end up using approximations and getting an answer that is not actually correct. It is these kind of protocols that you will actually discover once you start asking the right questions, which is, Okay, I did it slow. Why? The other thing is सोचना बहुत पड़ा, right? So why was that? Concept clear नहीं है, question समझने में time लगा, या फिर लंबे तरीके से solve किया तो बहुत सारे steps थे which invariably just ended up increasing the time that you spent thinking. What was it? Say it was the first scenario. Concept clear नहीं था. Okay, practice 2 or 3 questions of the similar type, time yourself, boom, you're done. If that doesn't do it, fine, go to YouTube, go to your notes, go to your videos that you have, watch the concept 1.5x at least now, not less than that. Second scenario, question समझने में time लगा. Like, why? Language problem थी? Was the question written in a way which was very confusing? Was it written in a way that you've not personally come across before? Or was it a scenario where you basically ended up drawing a mental map of what the situation was in the question and then you forgot it or messed it up and then you had to read the question again, draw it, or something like that? Kya tha? What was it? Act accordingly. These are easy things to solve too. You don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that if you're messing up mental models in the exam, which is a very normal thing to do under pressure, by the way, that you should always be drawing. Your first instinct needs to actually visually represent that situation on your notepad. So if that is the kind of problem that you're running into, there's a clear fix. You just need to recognize it and apply it. Let's move on to the third scenario that was लंबे तरीके से solve किया तो बहुत सारे steps थे, बहुत सोचना पड़ा. That's why it took longer. Okay, there's absolutely no shortage of shortcut videos. Go watch one. Whenever you're doing shortcuts, please remember that there are scenarios where it may not be applicable. वो जरूर देख लेना. Blindly shortcuts please मत लगाना. I never used shortcuts because personally I was not comfortable with them, but if you are, be very careful that you understand where they are not applicable. So yeah, this is basically how you need to analyze your mocks. And in addition to this, like I explained in this video, you also need to analyze your energy levels. Were you prone to making problems in a specific part? If you were, maybe take a sectional on that. Did you make the same mistakes then? If you didn't, then clearly it's an energy problem. So maybe you want to think about where you're losing energy, why you're doing that. And if that is the case, then maybe you want to give mocks for endurance. Maybe you want to see what section actually is draining you out and come up with a strategy for that. By the way, there's a name for this technique. It's called the 5 whys. The idea is कम mocks दो चाहे, लेकिन उससे इतना सीखो कि next mock अपने आप improve हो जाए. The next thing is about tracking time, not marks. We obsess over marks. We obsess over percentiles. Even when we know that percentiles are normalized, even when we know that the people who are actually taking mocks represent people who are likely going to be getting higher percentiles in the actual exam. Still, we can't obsess over them, obsess more over timing. Because mocks are about learning, not bragging rights. मॉक्स में 99 परसेंटाइल ला के अगर एक्चुअल एग्जाम में 90 परसेंटाइल ही आई तो क्या फ़ायदा, क्या ब्रैगिंग राइट्स यार. सो आई स्टार्टेड लॉगिंग टाइम पर क्वेश्चन टाइप. And before you say, I'm not talking about okay, we get like 40 minutes per section, there are this many questions, so normal arithmetic, this is the time that I actually need to spend per question. No, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about per question type. So let's say RCs. How long do you take to read an RC and solve it? And then, of course, not all RCs are the same. So you can categorize them. A very simple one could be long versus short. Another could do with specific topics. For example, a friend of mine actually used to struggle quite a lot with philosophical RCs. That categorization is actually going to help. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you a strategy that a friend of mine actually used. She noticed that when she was attempting long RCs, she was taking longer and her accuracy was low. Now, the longer part is understandable. It takes longer to read, and there's, of course, more information that you have to absorb. And even when you go back to look at where the question is referring to, where it exactly is in the RC, it takes longer. Totally get it. But why then is the accuracy low as well? So there was definitely a problem here that she could solve. She also noticed that she was scared because in mocks, her accuracy with these was low. She thought that it would be prudent if she attempted these when she was fresh, when her mind was fresh. So she was attempting these longer RCs at the very beginning, and that was a huge problem. So we discussed and we basically thought that maybe she should try attempting everything else first before going to the longer RCs, even though she would be a little bit drained in the process when she got to them. So she had started prioritizing shorter RCs first, then she would take a break with parajumbles and all the other stuff, and then in the very end, she would get to the longer ones. Boom! Nothing about how she actually used to go solving longer RCs changed, but her VARC scores jumped. Her stress level during the exam came down because now when she was actually solving these longer RCs, she was no longer stressed about the fact that she is on a timer and she actually has the whole section ahead of her that she has to get to. That made all the difference there is. The last one she even skipped just to make time for the rest. And her score actually spiked. VARC actually went from a section she used to dread to something that was enjoyable now. In DILR, I used to actually waste 10 minutes of my time trying to force set 1 every single time. Now I scan all sets in the first 3 minutes. That eventually became that, okay, before we even get to a set, we are going to scan every set in 3 minutes or 5 even. The impact is that big. And that is non-negotiable. And I'm not just scanning the sets. Okay, so I'm not just going through, this is a seating arrangement question, this is an age question or whatever like that. I'm not just scanning those. I'm also scanning the questions, because a lot of times easy questions in these sets don't actually require you to solve them completely. Those are low-hanging fruits that you actually want to grab, okay? Because it's a competitive exam. If you're not grabbing those low-hanging fruits, guess what? Someone else is. Grab those. Don't go for satisfaction of your intellectual vanity in the exam. Easy wale pehle karo, lock those marks in. Then do whatever you want, okay? But again, pacing is important because you don't want to run into a situation where you over-invested in any particular section and ran out of energy for the next. You can only do that in quant, not before that. And I think that it's safe to say that by the time you get to quant, you only have enough energy to actually get through that section. Easy wale pehle karo, log those marks in, remember the ABC format, abhi karo, baad mein karo, chhod do. You don't need a new strategy every week, you just need a clear, clean rule set that you actually follow. Another thing that I want to talk about is that I stopped giving mocks randomly. So until this point, I was actually giving mocks whenever it felt like it. So part of it would be planned and part of it would be spontaneous. So for instance, if it was the weekend, I knew that, okay, it's Saturday, I have to give a mock today. So I would give it whenever I felt good about myself, because let's be honest, we are all trying to maximize our chances of getting a good percentile. It's motivating, it feels good. But guess what? You don't get the same luxury in the exam. I stopped giving mocks randomly, same slot as the actual CAT exam, same chair, same 3-hour discipline, no phones, no breaks, nothing. Your brain actually needs context to perform. Don't deny it that. Give it that routine. And the week I fixed my schedule, the next, my quant crash kind of vanished, because I was training my mind and my body to actually be active during that particular time slot. And that matters. Now I know a lot of people actually are out there saying that अपने हिसाब से पढ़ो, routine matter नहीं करता, जब exam देना है अपने हिसाब से दो, वो ज़्यादा matter करता है, routine matter नहीं करता. Well, I just have 2 words for those people: circadian rhythms. Look it up. पढ़ो जब पढ़ना है. I don't really mind that, because of course a lot of you are probably working, a lot of you are probably dealing with your college stuff. Life happens. So पढ़ो जब अपने हिसाब से पढ़ना है, लेकिन जब तुम्हें मॉक देना है, okay, unless if you have the luxury, at least weekends पे तो है, तब कैट के स्लॉट पे दे लो. संडे को ही तो होता है, तो एटलीस्ट संडे को तो दे सकते हो, सैटरडे संडे तो दे सकते हो ना टाइम पे. प्लीज उस टाइम पे दो, फायदा होता है. स्टैमिना ऐसे ही बिल्ड होता है. Another part of this was having a rescue plan. So there will come a point in your exam when you'll panic. It will happen, 100%. But you can't fight panic with logic in that moment. So like I mentioned in this video, micro resets. These are your best friends in the exam. The moment you feel that you're being overwhelmed by a question or doubts start crowding your mind about the result or anything like that, go for a micro reset. Okay? Train yourself for that. So my strategy was leave that, head down, come back, do an easy one that I'm confident about, and then continue with solving the exam. So it is simple, it's mechanical, it resets your brain. Do that in your mocks as well. okay? Because that is basically how you train your muscle for the actual exam. So every topper actually has some version of this, but they just don't call it that. Mock में अगर इन सब चीज़ों के लिए plan नहीं करोगे तो actual exam में panic ही वो plan बन जाता है. I did all this for a few weeks, and a few weeks after, my scores actually started climbing because I was fixing a lot of those mistakes that I was prone to making. So 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, and finally 99, and then beyond. And honestly, it was not magic. I was not studying any more than I usually was before this. It was largely investigation and subtraction. So less waste, fewer impulses, cleaner process. I stopped reacting to mocks emotionally. They became experiments. They're okay, I believe this went wrong. I have a plan for that. Let's test this hypothesis and see where this gets me. And when you treat mocks like data, not judgment, you will discover that now you're interested at the prospect of actually giving a mock instead of dreading it, or rather dreading the percentile that you're going to get after it. You finally start playing the exam, not surviving it. So score बदलने से पहले mindset बदलना जरूरी होता है. बस वो moment पकड़ लो. So if your scores are stuck, don't panic. It's not a dead end, it's a signal. You've entered the second phase of your preparation, the one that actually separates hard workers from top percentilers. Every plateau hides the data that will take you to your new high. That is the meaning of analyzing a mock. And once you understand that, breaking limits stops being luck. It becomes a habit because you're actively trying to solve those problems. So next time you see that flat score graph, don't curse it. Just look at it, say, the climb begins here. If this helped, please like the video and subscribe. It really helps me and the channel. And please share this with someone who is having a tough time with mocks whose score has plateaued. Stay tuned for more tips that will help you in the exam. Go study now.